Good morning, this is Mrs. Clifford. I got a sick kid at home today, so we're going to shuffle things up a little bit. We'll get back to our DBQ on Thursday when I see you. Today we're just going to switch it up and do what I plan to do Thursday today, which is talk about Latin American diplomacy. So where is Latin America? That's an important thing you need to know. If you look at this map over here on the right, and the inset that's up at the top, you can see this area of the world is known as Latin America. And the reason why it's known as Latin America is because during the colonial period, most of the European countries who came over to colonize this area spoke the Latin languages: Spanish, Portuguese, French. Those are languages that came from or derived from Latin. And so these countries have devolved, even though these countries have evolved over time to be independent, they still retain that part of their culture, and they are known as the Latin American countries, or Latinos. You've seen this political cartoon before, and to recap, we know that the outcome of the Spanish-American War, not only did it help to provide the United States with new territories, but this new reputation as a world power, this new confidence that they had influence and that they could affect and impact things that were happening around the world and to benefit them. What I'd like you to do is just take a minute, pause this video, and just evaluate this cartoon. Take a look at the symbols, take a look at the meanings here, and then turn back on when you're ready. All right, notice how the artist portrays Uncle Sam to symbolize the expansion of the United States. Notice how he grows. And then pay particular attention to our 1899 Uncle Sam. I'm sure that grabbed your attention right away. Think about how the artist has drawn him and what that might symbolize. Also take a look at what Uncle Sam is holding and what that also might symbolize and how that might impact the message here. And then finally, take a look at those hands that are extended out on the right-hand side. You can tell that they are labeled. And the gesture there symbolizes, obviously, the respect of the rest of the world in wanting to now have a beneficial relationship with this newly powerful United States. So, in 1901, we have a new president, and you've heard his name before. His name is Theodore or Teddy Roosevelt, and yes, that's where we get the term teddy bear. He was an avid hunter and also an environmental protectionist, believe it or not. And, there's a lore that he, instead of killing a bear, let it go. And so some enterprising toy maker capitalized on the story and created the teddy bear. So that is named after our president. And as you've heard from the Spanish-American War information, he is a war hero. He led a cavalry of men into Cuba and scored a very key victory at the Battle of San Juan Hill. His men were known as the Rough Riders because they came from all different walks of life, but they kind of accepted each other as equals as they worked together. And as you look at that picture down at the bottom, I'm sure you can spot Teddy Roosevelt. There he is. So Teddy Roosevelt decided to take a new direction in U.S. diplomacy. He was a very pro-imperialist. He was definitely leading the cry for war during the Spanish-American War, and clearly he, by resigning his commission in the military and joining the army to help fight, you can tell just how gung-ho he was about United States' participation in war. He decided he wanted to enhance the Monroe Doctrine, and we talked about that earlier. The Monroe Doctrine was advanced in 1823. It was like I said, it was more bark than bite. It basically warned European countries against further colonizing Latin America, or if they were to relinquish one of their colonies in Latin America to not come back for it again, just to let it be. And this was, like I said, it wasn't something that the United States really was able to back up so much as just an evidence that they were protectionist in their policy. They wanted to, as a young country, be able to protect themselves and to expand and grow freely. You kind of characterize it as get out and stay out. Well, Teddy Roosevelt wanted to expand upon this. He added a new twist to the Monroe Doctrine called the Roosevelt Corollary, the Roosevelt Addition, the Roosevelt asterisk, if we talk about that before. And basically, his thought is, not only is Europe not allowed into Latin America anymore, but the United States is now the new Lord Protector of Latin America. The United States now has the right, because of its best interest, to take care of the Latin American countries, to intervene if they seem to be unstable or if they need protection. This intervention was right along with Teddy's imperialist tendencies, because it was a like it or not intervention. He wasn't really giving Latin American countries any choice whether or not the United States decided to intervene on their behalf. And we call this big stick diplomacy because Teddy modeled his diplomacy after an African proverb: speak softly, but carry a big stick, and you will go far, as he says. And basically what that means is be prepared to back up your words with action. And so what Teddy decided to do, or what he was able to do in order to back up his decisions to intervene in situations in Latin America, was use his newfound powerful weapon that the United States had. And that would be the U.S. Navy. The U.S. military might, as you remember from the Spanish-American War, the United States' Navy was a surprisingly powerful force that was able to knock off the Spanish, which was regarded as one of the best navies in the world. And Teddy basically was able to make things happen in Latin America the way he wanted, because of the threat that he would intervene militarily if not. And many of these Latin American countries clearly were not as powerful and powerless to really stop him. And so that's why we call it big stick diplomacy. He's going to tell you what he wants you to do, but really it's not a suggestion. It's a command. So let me talk to you about some examples of how Teddy Roosevelt uses big stick diplomacy. One of the examples that he used big stick diplomacy with was in terms of economic matters. If a particular Latin American country was faltering economically, Teddy Roosevelt would step in. And one of the most famous examples of this was in 1904. The island of the Dominican Republic went bankrupt. It owed a lot of money to European countries. In particular, it owed a lot of money to Germany. And it was unable to pay back its debts. And so Germany was threatening to intervene, to come in, to take over the Dominican government in order to reap back its debts. And Teddy Roosevelt essentially came in to the Dominican Republic, and he basically forced them to hand over administration of all of their government services to the United States. The United States actually, in effect, took over the Dominican's government and helped them to pay back their debts. That not only enforced the Monroe Doctrine by making sure that Germany stayed out of Latin America, but it reinforced this Roosevelt corollary that the United States will tell the Latin American countries how they are going to act and what they need to do. And as you can see in this cartoon, you can see the artist symbolizes the Monroe Doctrine as Teddy Roosevelt standing on his ship, his naval might, and has the big gun pointed at the king, who, as you can see there, has document in his hand that represents the debt, the claims that they are seeking against the Dominican Republic, and that he's reaching out to try and grab the gentleman in the island of the Dominican Republic, but Teddy is preventing him with that military force. So it's a protectionist policy that is set up to help Latin America, but it's also set to protect the United States' newfound world power and to make sure that nobody encroaches on their area of the world. Now they can really enforce it, whereas back in the era of the Monroe Doctrine, they really couldn't enforce it. The second example of how big stick diplomacy was used was when the United States felt like it needed to intervene in Latin American affairs as a policeman. A lot of nations in Latin America had either just earned their independence from their European country, or they were in the process of trying to get their independence from a European colony. And so there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of instability down in Latin America as these newly independent countries start to figure out for themselves how to take care of themselves. But one of the biggest examples of how Roosevelt used big stick diplomacy was in 1906, and this happens in Cuba. The Cubans are still trying to sort out how to handle themselves after earning their independence as a result of the Spanish-American War. And there's instability in Cuba, and several Cuban citizens decide that they are not happy with the installed government, and they want to rebel and start over again and create a whole new government. And these Cubans are definitely famous for their rebellions. As we mentioned earlier, having a rebellion in Cuba affects the United States economically in terms of sugar trade. And so the United States decided it was going to stop this rebellion on its own. It sent troops over. It halted the Cuban rebels. It also intervened on behalf of the Cuban government, restructured the government to the United States' liking to make sure that the leaders in place continued pro-United States policies. This is a quote from a letter that Teddy Roosevelt wrote one of his cabinet members about the Cuban situation. It says, "I am so angry with that infernal little Cuban republic that I would like to wipe its people off the face of the earth. All that we have wanted is that they would behave themselves and be prosperous and happy so that we would not have to interfere. And now they have started an utterly unjustifiable and pointless revolution and may get things into such a snarl that we have no alternative." It almost sounds like he's talking about children, unruly children, that he needs to keep in line. And so, again, he's using big stick diplomacy, forcing actions upon the Cubans with, the backup of his powerful army, powerful military, to make sure that things happen to go smoothly and not affect the United States negatively. You can see in this political cartoon another example. You see the two little individuals at the bottom wearing cultural garb here, represent the countries of Nicaragua and Honduras, and they obviously look like they are throwing punches at each other. And you see Uncle Sam here on the left looking very annoyed and saying, "Don't step on my feet, boys," symbolizing, don't let your quabble with each other get in the way of what helps me out in this area of the world, or gets in the way of my economic or political military success. And as you can see down there on the left, standing right next to Uncle Sam, is a teddy bear, obviously symbolizing Teddy Roosevelt. The final example of how big stick diplomacy is used in Latin America is probably the most famous. So if you look at this picture of the Western Hemisphere of the world, and if you think about where Virginia is over there on the East Coast, if I wanted to get to the West Coast. And if I owned a company and I had a very large shipment of steel and I wanted to get it to San Francisco so that they can, build up their city, I could ship it across the continent on rail. And the United States certainly had built up an extensive network of rail. But it really would be cheaper if I could send it via water. And that way I could send a larger amount. Ships did carry larger amounts than railroads did. And it would be cheaper, not having to pay all the rail lines money to ship my steel. The only problem is, if you think about it, you have to go all the way around South America and all the way back up to get there. There is no waterway that helps that anybody could use to get around to the United States any faster. Well, Teddy Roosevelt wanted to change that. And so he wanted to build a canal through that very tiny strip of land. It's called an isthmus, located at the bottom of Central America, where it connects with South America. This actually had been attempted before. The French had already purchased or rented the land from Colombia to build this canal through one of their territories. The territory's name was Panama. The French were unable to build it for a lot of technological reasons. It was very difficult to build, but mainly because they were losing a lot of men to mysterious illnesses, and they couldn't keep people alive long enough to build the canal. And so they completely abandoned the project. I mean, literally left the heavy loading equipment, the heavy lifting equipment, at the construction site, completely abandoned for whatever. And the United States said, you know what? The French took a go at it. They couldn't make it work. Let us try. We want to try it. This would benefit us immensely. So they contacted the Colombians and they said, look, we are willing to rent this strip of land from you for 99 years. We'll pay you $10 million for the rent. We'll let you use the canal when it's done. And, this completely benefits both of us. Colombia thought about the idea and they were very close to agreeing about it. And then at the last minute, they changed their mind. I think they'd gotten kind of a taste of, what it would be like to have a major world power in their backyard with the French. And even though the French weren't successful, they still had enough of them to know they didn't like it. They didn't want the United States to be breathing down their neck. And they were quite frankly worried that if they ceded the Panama area, the Panama Isthmus, to the United States, what else would the United States want? Would this be the end of their demands? And so it was a very tough decision, but they decided to decline the United States' generous offer for lease of the land. Well, here kicks in big stick diplomacy. Speak softly but carry a big stick. Teddy Roosevelt was not happy with the Colombians' rejection of the U.S. proposal, and so he decided he was going to make this happen anyway. But you can't come right out and just take land, because that would have resulted in a lot of opposition both within his country and around the world. It was just been a completely immoral, unethical way of doing this. So he found a slightly less immoral, unethical way of doing this. What he decided to do was assist the Panamanians, who, as I mentioned earlier, were a territory of Colombia. This is where they wanted to build the canal. He decided to assist the Panamanian people in rebelling against Colombia and help them to declare their independence as a newly independent nation off of Colombia. He even went so far as to send naval vessels down to Colombia just to sit offshore to remind Colombia that if they stopped the Panamanians in setting up their own independent nation, the United States would be happy to intervene on behalf of these people who are just looking to find their independence, who are just looking to seek out the very same things that the United States had once sought out in their infancy. And so once the newly independent country of Panama had been set up, they immediately signed a treaty to lease the land that the United States sought to the United States, and the United States was able to build the canal. And that is how the United States was able to exert its newfound world power status into helping to control things in Latin America. At this point, what you're going to do is your substitute is going to give you a map. We're going to be starting World War I next week, and so I need you to get familiar with the geography of Europe at the time that war begins. So you're going to need to use a textbook, you're going to need some colored pencils, and you're going to need a pen to be able to complete this assignment. I hope you have a wonderful day. I will see you on Thursday. Bye-bye.